Hey guys, my name's Nick. I'm a Microsoft Certified Expert Administrator. Create a lot of content for MSPs, and in today's video, as part of a little mini series I've created here on securing the remote workforce, I'm basically going through all the modules within the Microsoft offering here in the suite and showing you some of the hardening policies that you can create. I've already created one on Azure AD and one on Exchange, so if you guys haven't seen those yet, definitely go check them out. Today we'll be focusing on SharePoint and OneDrive, but I'll additionally be doing videos on Teams, Intune, DLP, and auditing and reporting as well too. So looking at this, we're looking at some of the high-level policies that you can configure in your tenant that aren't on by default with some of the features that you have available. Keep in mind that the licensing of which I'm referencing in most of these videos here is related to Microsoft 365 Business Premium. It was recently renamed from Microsoft 365 Business. It's a $20 SKU per user per month, but does include a lot of these heightened security and compliance features that we can enable for the remote workforce. So getting into it here, I'm going to be going through each one of these one by one, showing you a little demo of how to set this up as well too, where to go in the admin settings to configure these settings. So first one here, we have limit access on non-managed devices. So with this one, this allows us to set up a conditional access policy of which we can go in and restrict the download capabilities when users are accessing OneDrive or SharePoint on a device that isn't managed. And when I say isn't managed, I mean it's either not hybrid joined to Azure AD from your local Active Directory, or it's not Intune managed, or it's in an incompliant state within Intune. So within here, you can create a conditional access policy that restricts web access only, and they aren't able to download anything to a personal owned device or personal PC. So this helps you, one, from the data loss prevention standpoint, also helps from them being able to save these documents locally for them to potentially get infected or breached on a device that you don't personally manage. You don't have your security stack being applied to that like your own personal AV and endpoint protection. So getting into it here, I'm going to pop into a portal here. This is a portal with M365 Business Premium licensing enabled. And what we're going to do here first is take a look at the various settings available. Microsoft has a whole article on how to set this up for limiting access or blocking access. So you can actually block access to certain sites if you really wanted to as well too. And where this might come in handy is if you are looking for users who want access outside of their personal computer or outside, of their work computer to access on a personal account. There might be sites that are internet only, of which you would never want them to access on a personally owned device, like HR, for instance, that might have sensitive documents with PII and things like that. So if we were in here in the admin center, if we go into the SharePoint admin center here, what we can do is go under the policy section and we can go under access control, and you can click on the unmanaged devices section here. For unmanaged devices, this is a cool one where you could just do pretty much black and white setting, binary option of allowing limited web access only. And again, this is for devices that are either hybrid Azure AD joined or they are enrolled into Intune and are marked as compliant. So with that, or with the settings that I'm about to show you, you can just do this and provide this blanket policy across your entire tenant to avoid them from being able to access it on the desktop app or like the OneDrive client, for instance, mobile app, or going onto the web only to access these documents, and it'll give them a banner, which I'll show you here in a second. Otherwise, you can limit the access to certain sites, or limiting or blocking certain sites with PowerShell scripts and conditional access policies. So I'll show you that here as well too. So if I go into the conditional access section here, I am getting there by going a couple different ways you can get there actually. I'll go into the Azure Active Directory portal here, and I'll go under Azure Active Directory, and I'll go down under security and click on conditional access. And from here we can create a new policy. I've already created one for demo purposes just to show you what it looks like, but this is basically restricting SharePoint site access. Here I've gone ahead and named the policy, and you can define specific users or groups, or you can say all users or groups that can access this site. For cloud apps or actions, you want to specify SharePoint Online. So you go select apps and you'll select SharePoint Online here. For the conditions, you're going to want to go under client apps and make sure you check this to on. Click on browser, mobile apps, and desktop clients. And click on done. For grant, you don't have to select anything here, but for session, you'll want to select use app enforce restrictions. And this is basically what we're going to set up here with PowerShell. And this is if you wanted to go ahead and basically limit access or block access to specific sites and not a blanket policy to say they can access this altogether. This is if you want to get that granular. So if you don't, then just come in here and use the UI to say, okay, just a limited web access only or block access. But if you want to specify certain sites or users or things like that to come in here, then you want to use this conditional access policy with PowerShell. So you click on save here, and then from the PowerShell module, you'll connect to SharePoint Online. So I'll pop up here and it's just connect SPO service that you'll connect to and use your global admin credentials to connect. And from there, you can use these commandlets that are outlined within this support article here to start defining, if you want to block a certain site, you can set the site with the identity here and use the conditional access policy to block access or to limit access to a single site or something like that, where they can only access a certain feature set of that. So within here, you can set a lot of different policies in the sense of looking at your sites. So if I go into my personal sites here, this test tenant, I could look at one of the the SharePoint URLs here, pop it open, and this is the URL that I would populate within the syntax here of the line item. You can also populate OneDrive accounts in here as well too to block download access. But if I run this, this is saying, hey, I'm going to go ahead and set this site to block access completely to this SharePoint site called stocks. So I can do that, and this will run and give me a new command line when it's finished. Then if I pop onto this particular device here, this is a device that's enrolled into Intune, but it's not exactly in a compliant state here. So I can click on sign in, and I'll click on SharePoint, and then I will click on stocks because that's the site I just configured here, and I'll get this access denied. It says organizational policies, you can't access this resources from an untrusted device. And to take a look at that, if I go in here and I go to Endpoint Manager, I can come into the devices section, go to Windows devices. Just to show you guys, this is in a non-compliant state. This is the device that I'm on right now. It's in a non-compliant state, so we're not giving them access, or we're blocking access completely. Otherwise, if this was a personal device or a device that wasn't compliant, you could give them basic limited access in that sense. So if we go back up here, we can say we're going to still use this site here, but allow limited access. This is the parameter that we're defining here. And now if I go back to this device, go back to SharePoint, click on stocks, allows me access to the site, but it'll give me this banner that says your organization doesn't allow you to download or print or sync using this device. So you're able to basically allow this basic read-only access here. They can still access the documents on the web and view them here, but they're not able to download them or print them or sync them down to an unmanaged device or an uncompliant device if they're enrolled into Intune. So that's a really powerful one there. You can do the same with their OneDrive. So OneDrive Online, you can use this URL stopping here with their prefix of their name, and they'll get the same message you already ran. This is why you're seeing this. So they don't allow them to sync down this using this device. So these are pretty powerful that you can use here just to stop data loss and avoid people accessing these documents on an unprotected device or a device that's in a non-compliant state, because one of the features there is they've they've removed something that makes it uncompliant. So that's a really powerful one. You can start off out of the gate to set up. The next one here is more so for a hybrid environment, block syncing to unmanaged devices. This is where you are syncing your local Active Directory up to the cloud, and you want to basically block the OneDrive sync down to a device that isn't enrolled or joined to your domain. So with this one, you can go to your DC, and let me pull that up here, 1 second. And here on the DC, you can simply open PowerShell's administrator and click, or just run the commandlet of get 80 domain. And what you'll want to do here is grab the GUID that is provided. So that's right here, this object GUID. You can grab it and you can copy it. From here, you can go back into the SharePoint Admin Center. And what we'll do here is click on OneDrive Admin Center. And then here on the left-hand side, you'll click on Sync. And here you can check off Allow Syncing only on PCs joined to specific domains. And you can go ahead and just paste in that GUID and save it here. So that way, users who are on personal devices that aren't joined to your domain can't use the OneDrive Sync client. So again, it's more DLP and also heightened security on accessing corporate files on a device that's not protected with your security stack. So that's a good one there to enforce if you're running a hybrid environment. Next one here, configure idle session timeout. This is again for devices that aren't managed. I think all these settings are important here in the remote workforce, just simply because we want to protect our corporate data on these devices that don't have our security stack on them. So here we can go under access control, and under access control it's idle session timeout, and this is again on unmanaged devices after a period of inactivity, and you can sign out inactive users. This is good again if they're just on personal device, and you can configure, you know, the session timeout. This is also good for compliance regulated firms like HIPAA and FINRA, where you need that as part of the compliance regulations, and give them notice as well too. But basically, if they're even accessing this on the web, we want to sign them out after a certain minute of inactivity, in case they're using it at a unmanaged location. Not as likely right now, things being closed, but when they do open it back up and people continue to work remote, we don't want them to keep these sessions open on these unmanaged devices as well too. Especially if they get infected and somebody has control of their device and it's just an open tab that they can go then and access resources. So that's another good one to pull up there and configure for unmanaged devices. Additionally, block legacy authentication. This same page here, you can block access. They don't use modern authentication here. Modern auth gives you the ability to enforce multi-factor authentication. So this you want to set to block access. By default it's on to allow. So you'll just want to switch this to block access. Third-party Office apps or third-party apps trying to get access to OneDrive or SharePoint, you don't want them to be using legacy auth. And this is something, saying, hey, we want to request access to SharePoint or OneDrive for this data. It's just an integration, but that third-party app doesn't use modern authentication, so they're at risk, get breached, and then you have access to then your corporate data here within SharePoint or OneDrive. So you want to do block access to that. Configure MAM policies. So MAM policies are part of Windows information protection and the app protection policies that come part of Microsoft Intune. I've made other videos on this if you want to see them in depth, but basically they can prevent save as and copy paste into unmanaged applications on devices that are enrolled into our management solution or not. So it's a really powerful thing to do, especially with people accessing their corporate data on their personal cell phone. You can block that access immediately. So with this one, you can do this in a couple of different ways here, in the sense of giving or setting these policies here. So the first thing that you can come in and do is go into OneDrive tab here, and we can click on device access. And so with this one, they have the mobile application management section here. Note that you'll only see this if you have EMS plus E3 configuration or licensing, which is a part of the Microsoft 365 Business Premium offering. Otherwise, you can go into the Intune section if you have Intune and configure it there, which I'll show you. But basically, you can deploy this policy here that blocks downloading of files, blocks downloading or taking of screenshots on Android, copying files and content, printing, backup, requires an app password for heightened security, so it makes them type in a PIN when they go on their mobile device, and then block opening OneDrive or SharePoint files and other apps. So like Google Drive, for instance, save as, encrypt the data when the device is locked. This is a great one for compliance as well too, so it's encrypted at rest. And you can also remotely wipe the data if the device is lost or stolen or the employee leaves. And then you can configure them to re-sign in after that. And then if there's no activity on the device itself, you can wipe the data after a certain specified number of days. So these are all great things to implement. You can either do this here, this is specifically for the mobile apps on iOS or Android, but you can also come into the endpoint manager here, and under here you can go to apps and app protection policies. And again, you can create this policy on iOS, iPad, Android, and Windows 10 devices here. You define the applications of which you're going to protect, and then you can enforce those controls as well too, like the additional password, like the encryption, preventing them from saving as or copy paste to unmanaged applications. I've made videos on this, so I don't want to take up the time to walk through the policies completely. I do just want to show you a brief demo of what it looks like on a Windows 10 device too, just so you can see the power of what it actually does. So this is a computer that here is, again, the one that we use to show you these policies. But if I go into the Google Gmail account here that's not managed, and I try to attach a document here that's in my OneDrive. This is my OneDrive account. I can say, okay, let me attach this and click on open. It gives me this message that I can't use my work content here. So it's basically saying that I can't copy paste or use these particular devices or content within the Gmail account. So that's a really powerful feature you can implement here for data loss. And the same would be true on the Android, iOS as well too, where they're trying to save as into unmanaged locations from OneDrive or SharePoint using the documents within there to an unmanaged location like Google Drive. So again, check out those videos. I'll link them below if you guys want to see that in depth on each one of these platforms. The next thing that we want to get into here is configuring ATP safe attachments. So safe attachments is part of Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection. This allows you to scan documents within the OneDrive and SharePoint environments and basically scan them continuously for malicious content to avoid anybody opening up that or sharing that throughout the organization. So this does give you that protection here, and you can come into the Security and Compliance Center here. Now it's being rebranded to the Security Center, but if you have to, you can go back into the legacy environment. Under Threat Management, you can click on Policy, and here you can click on Safe Attachments. One thing you want to do is check this box that says turn on ATP for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams. So this does allow you to protect these files continuously throughout these environments. Then you'll want to add a policy here, which I've already done just for purposes of showing you here. This is specifically for email delivery, which I'm not going to get into here, but it basically shows you that it can deliver the message and then reattach it here. You can apply it to certain recipients or domains, but I just recommend applying it to the whole domain and the tenant and simply checking this box so it does those scans. If it detects it, it'll put a little message next to it that has a little threat icon that shows that it's malicious and doesn't allow the users to click through it all the way. It'll open up a page and say something about the attachment being malicious, and they'll not be able to continue on. So that's a good thing to implement as well too. This licensing ATP, again, comes with Microsoft 365 Business Premium, but it also is an add-on for $2 a user a month if you have a more simplistic plan like Microsoft 365 Business Standard, which is $12.50 a month. So if you don't want to go the full route, you might want to do that. I do consider this to be a great selling point, though, with all these security features, not only with SharePoint OneDrive, but also with the other parts of the solution stack that I've talked about before, like Exchange and Azure AD, things like that, that you can bring to your customer during these times and say, hey, if you want to be secure, this is the package we need to go with because of all these security features that I can help protect you with. So the next one here I have is define sharing policy at the site level. So with this one, there's a lot of unique configurations for sharing across the tenant that you can configure for SharePoint and OneDrive. We go back into the SharePoint Admin Center here and go to sharing. I don't really like to touch these too much that are defaulted because they do get really granular in the sense that you're really restricting your users from communicating, sharing documents outside the organization. And I recommend applying more so AIP labels and DLP settings that would supplement this a little bit, which I'll get into in another video. But I don't recommend starting to change this to only people within your organization or limit the external sharing by domain. This is getting super restrictive here. And if you work with a company here that shares a lot of documents with external users, then this is going to become a quick pain point for them not to be able to share that upon unless it's by request to you by adding a certain domain. This may be something where the company does business with only a specific sister company always, and if they do want to share documents outside, they can request it as a formal request, and it's very rare that that happens, which is the only case which I would say that you would want to do this. But with the one that I'm talking about here, we want to define the sharing policy at the site level, which basically says, hey, you can share this with external users and they have to authenticate, or it's anonymous link where they don't have to sign in and become a guest user within your organization. So these are the two, that you can get into. Recommend at least evaluating the sites within the company and saying that they can or cannot share externally. Like HR, again, is another great example of a site where you wouldn't want people to be sharing documents externally to external domains, things like that, for some of the document libraries that might be within there. So it's basically about evaluating the active sites within the company and defining the sharing policies. So within here, you can click on any site, you can click on the policy section, and you can define the external sharing policy. So it's saying only people within your organization, no external sharing allowed. By default, it'll be in here as, I believe, new existing guest or anyone. But you can define this as granular as you want. But I recommend for the sites that are super confidential, in that sense, you would come in here and say only people within your organization, and they might need to create a special request to then share it as a rare event. But this is something where you can restrict the sharing permissions at the site level. Recommend trying to organize them in that fashion too if you're just setting this up for them as far as SharePoint goes or migrating from a file share into SharePoint. Defining the more confidential sites where you wouldn't be doing that, and then other sites where they're allowed to freeform share with existing guest users or guest users that are brand new to the organization. And even having this as the step down as guest users, because by authenticating into your environment, they become a guest user within your organization, and you can revoke their access to these documents at any time then, or specifically say it's expired after a certain number of days or something like that. So those are some of the settings that I would configure there, where people can go ahead and limit the access there, and this would be least restrictive to most restrictive in that sense. And then also additionally, if we go back into sharing here, the other ones that you might want to configure, the default link when they try to share files and folders within SharePoint and OneDrive, you might want to switch this to only people within the organization, just so people get in the mindset of having to manually force to anyone with the link to think twice about sending something that might be potentially a security risk. And you can configure, if you do have the anyone links, the expiration date and the permissions associated with that as well too. So these I consider to be more granular, that wouldn't be applied holistically to every single tenant, but you may be able to configure to certain clients based off their workflows and who they interact with across the company. The next one here, though, block guests from sharing what they don't own, something I would set up in every tenant. So you basically don't want to give guests free-form access to say, I can share this with whoever. That just creates a chain reaction to data loss prevention, security concerns, if something is accidentally leaked to a guest, and then they all of a sudden can share it with anybody else. So this is checked by default, and so you want to just basically uncheck it and leave it like that. It'll tell you to save here at the bottom if it wasn't already done that. And that's something that I would definitely configure for every tenant. So the last one here I have is configure known folder move. This is again for a hybrid environment where your devices are joined to a local domain. You can push out these settings also with Microsoft Intune. So either you can use legacy GPOs to push this out to do the known folder move with their Windows credentials to silently configure this behind the scenes so that users don't even have to sign in, and it starts capturing all the data on the device. If it's a managed device, you want to capture and start saving the files and folders like the documents folder, things like that. So if people are saving corporate documents to those locations, when they leave, you can remove their access and they don't have access to that anymore. Or if their device is lost or stolen, you can again remove that off the device as well too, and not have to worry about this liability of somebody else gaining access to those documents. So within here, you can again do this in group policy, but I want to show you within Intune as well too with the ADMX policies that you can configure. This had to be manual not that long ago, but it is something that is part of the templates now as well too. So if you go into the devices section, you click on Windows, click on configuration profiles. You'll create a new one here and you'll use administrative templates as the profile type. And so whenever you do this, I clicked on it and use OneDrive Sync. But under the properties section here, the configuration settings, there's two that you want to set, which is silently sign in uses OneDrive Sync client with the Windows credentials, and silently move Windows known folders to OneDrive. So this basically takes their credentials of which they're signing in and uses it to authenticate to OneDrive. If you're using AD Connect, they're going to have their credentials syncing anyway, so this would work out. And additionally, with the profile that you're setting here, it's going to automatically start syncing these documents. So again, no user interaction. It's better for them because it's silently doing it for them, and they don't have to worry about choosing the individual files or folders of which are going to be start to sync into OneDrive there. So this is definitely something that you want to come in and you can search for under all settings, but you'll find these two here and you can just click on them, and they built this UI to look exactly like the traditional group policy objects as well. So you want to click on enabled here and put in your tenant ID of the tenant within here for the OneDrive move. And if you guys need to know where that is, if you go into the Azure Active Directory Admin Center, Properties, Directory ID right here. So you want to put that in and enable it, and enable the sign in as well too. So this way also, if you're starting to use Intune, they can configure the OneDrive known folder move as well when they're setting that up. So those are all the settings that I wanted to show you guys as part of this video here. I try to keep it a little bit shorter just for the sake of time, and knowing that you guys don't want to watch a full hour-long video on all this, but love to hear any of the settings that you guys are configuring in your environments to harden SharePoint or OneDrive. If you want to comment those below, or any other questions or comments. Otherwise, please like or subscribe to the channel if you guys want to see more content around Microsoft 365, the modern environment, modern desktop, and Microsoft Intune, things like that. Trying to focus on the MSP space especially, and helping out during these times. Thanks guys, have a great day.